Maybe tonight feels heavier than usual. The noise of the day has faded, yet your thoughts still move, slow, like tides beneath the surface. You do not need to silence them, just listen. Somewhere beyond that restlessness, something is shifting. There is a moment, soft and almost invisible, when the old self begins to loosen its hold. What once felt certain starts to dissolve, like fog meeting the first hint of dawn. This is not an ending. It is the quiet beginning of a new chapter of the self. Jung once called it the night sea, the silent crossing between what has fallen apart and what is about to be born. In this stillness, there is no map, only breath. The universe speaks not in thunder, but in gentle rearrangements of the heart. You are not lost. You are simply being rewritten, quietly, beautifully, by time itself. The evening settles like a thin veil, and he moves through a quiet room where the mirror waits, patient and honest. In the reflection lies a face that has learned how to pass through doors, how to nod at the right time, how to smile without stirring the water underneath. The world has praised this easy surface so often that the surface began to believe it was the sea. He learned the greeting at the office that sounds warm but carries no weight. He learned the small talk in elevators, the careful laugh that belongs to no one, the practice sentence, "I am fine spoken," even when the chest is heavy. He learned how to be pleasant, available, and smooth, and each lesson added another thin layer between breath and truth. There is a name for this distance. Jung once suggested that people build a persona to belong, a social face sewn from roles and rules so that the tribe will keep them near the fire. A mask not made of plastic, but of expectations. The mask is useful, and the story honors that usefulness. It keeps the peace at work, softens rough edges at dinner, allows the crowd to move without bruising itself. Yet utility turns to weight when the mask begins to sit where skin should breathe, and the mind grows tired from holding it in place. Notice the ordinary scenes where the weight becomes clear. The late message answered with a cheerful tone while the body asks for sleep. The meeting where agreement rises to the lips before the heart has even entered the room. The visit with friends where laughter is easy, and afterward the silence feels strangely deeper than before. He is not a fraud for learning these roles. He is a human being who wished to be kept, and the wish was gentle. But belonging, bought at the price of absence, slowly empties the house from the inside, leaving the furniture of habit in rooms where no one lives. When the night is quiet enough, the house reveals its echo. Here the narrative does not demand rebellion. It suggests listening. It invites the small, steady courage of loosening a strap that has begun to chafe, of letting the face remember its original muscles, of allowing one honest breath to reach the floor of the lungs. A simple practice lives in the margin of this moment. On a plain page, the listener writes 3 roles carried most days, and beside each role, a single scene when the role felt heavy to hold. The page does not judge. It only gathers weather, and the body learns the forecast by reading it back. The recognition that follows is quiet. He sees that the mask once kept him safe, and that safety allowed him to grow, and that growing now asks for air. The door does not need to be kicked. It needs to be opened from the inside, slowly, with a hand that has remembered the shape of its own key. The mantra returns at the pace of a heartbeat, steady and kind. The mask was never your face, only your method of belonging. And in the calm that follows, the face beneath begins to breathe. Morning arrives softly, wrapped in a pale mist. The mirror is still clouded with steam, a thin curtain between the world and the self. Through it, the outline of a face begins to appear. Familiar, practiced, slightly tired. The mouth remembers to smile, as it always does. But in the fog, that smile looks less like joy and more like a reflex. Beneath the warmth of the water, something quiet inside begins to tremble. It is not fear. It is movement. There comes a season when the perfect mask starts to shift, not because of failure, but because of life itself. A fine crack forms where the edges used to meet. The eyes stop pretending before the lips do. The voice falters, then steadies. And in that small hesitation, the soul exhales for the first time in years. Nietzsche once wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star." The crack is that chaos, not destruction, but expansion. When the surface breaks, light finds an opening. What appears as disorder is often the soul's way of remembering its rhythm. In the quiet rooms of the mind, chaos does not shout. It hums beneath the skin. It changes how laughter sounds, how silence feels, how morning light touches the window. There is no need to panic when the seams begin to loosen. The performance was never meant to last forever. The role served its time. Now it is the curtain's turn to fall. The audience was never out there. It was the self waiting patiently in the dark, clapping for something real. He feels the tension between holding on and letting go. The instinct to appear fine remains, but it carries a fatigue too heavy to hide. The smile once built for others now flickers like a candle running out of wax, beautiful in its surrender. Beneath it, a softer truth begins to glow. The persona was a shelter. Now it becomes a window. The light entering through its cracks does not blind, it warms. To live without pretending is not to abandon strength. It is to allow strength to breathe. The mind resists, whispering that the world will not understand. But the heart knows that masks do not create belonging. Presence does. The most profound courage is not in keeping the facade, but in admitting it no longer fits. A gentle practice can begin here. For one day, do not try to be good, kind, or composed. Let your tone slip, your face rest, your rhythm slow. Do not fix the mirror when it fogs. Let it blur, and notice the figure who stands behind the blur, breathing, waiting, real. The mirror clears eventually, but the world inside it has changed. The cracks do not ruin the reflection. They reveal what holds it together. The soul no longer hides in the smile. It speaks through it. What breaks you reveals you. There comes a quiet hour when the soul can no longer bear the weight of pretending. It begins not with defiance, but with fatigue. A kind of honest exhaustion that asks for nothing but rest. The roles, once worn like fine garments, start to cling like damp fabric. They have served their purpose, yet they no longer fit. The unmasking does not arrive with a grand gesture. It unfolds slowly, like a breath drawn after years of holding it in. To remove the mask is to peel away a second skin, one that has fused with the flesh, warm and familiar, yet foreign. It hurts in a way that feels almost sacred. Every fragment that comes off carries a memory. The polite smiles, the concealed unease, the agreements made against instinct, the moments of silence when truth waited at the edge of the tongue. Pain is not punishment here. It is the sound of the self re-entering its body. Jung once said that individuation begins when we no longer identify with the role. What he meant was simple. Freedom does not begin with gain, but with the surrender of what no longer feels alive. As the layers fall, the air feels sharper, cleaner. There is no applause in this unveiling, no witness to mark the moment. Only the stillness of a person meeting their own eyes, seeing not perfection, but presence. The self that emerges is quieter, smaller perhaps, yet infinitely more real. It does not need to impress. It does not need to defend. It simply exists, raw, unfinished, and whole. In this honesty, there is discomfort, but also relief. Pretending was heavy. Being is light. The mind will search for old scripts, the ones that kept it safe, and find them blank. The silence that follows might seem strange at first, like stepping into a room with unfamiliar acoustics. But soon, the silence becomes music, the rhythm of breath rediscovered. The self learns again to move without choreography, to speak without rehearsal, to live without costume. A small act of remembrance can ease this transition. Write a letter to yourself, but do not use your name. Let feeling be the only author. Write of what aches, what longs, what quietly hopes to be understood. Write without trying to sound wise or good. The words are not for the world. They are for the self, the one who has waited behind every mask you have ever worn. When finished, read it softly aloud, as if introducing yourself for the first time. No storm follows this unveiling, only clarity. The skin breathes again, and the eyes stop searching for approval, and the heart resumes its natural pace. The mask was never an enemy. It was an old story that no longer needs to be told. To be honest is to breathe again, and in that breath, life begins to feel new. Not louder, not brighter, just real. There is an old attic inside every soul, a room seldom entered, yet always waiting. The air there is different, thick with dust, thin with memory. Light filters through a small window, soft and uneven, touching boxes stacked against the walls. Each one carries something the heart once found too heavy to hold in daylight. An unfinished conversation, a forgotten anger, a quiet shame folded into silence. Time has covered them with dust, but time has not erased them. They have simply waited. This is what Jung called the shadow. The part of us we refuse to see, the sum of what we deny, repress, or exile. He once said, "The shadow is 90% pure gold." At first, that sounds like paradox, but it is not. The gold hides beneath what we fear most. Every unwanted emotion, every instinct judged as wrong, is a sealed box in that attic. We think we buried them, yet they have been shaping us quietly, guiding our choices from behind closed doors. What we avoid does not disappear. It learns to whisper through other forms. Irritation, judgment, exhaustion, even perfectionism. The attic is not evil. It is misunderstood. Most people live on the floors below, decorating their visible rooms, pretending the locked door at the top of the stairs does not exist. Yet sometimes, in dreams or during sleepless nights, the door creaks open by itself. A memory drifts down the staircase. A face from years ago appears in thought, uninvited but persistent. That is the shadow calling, not to haunt, but to be acknowledged. It asks not for worship, only for presence. Imagine walking up those stairs with a candle in hand. The steps creak, the dust stirs. In the dimness, objects begin to take shape. An old letter, a photograph, a piece of you left behind. They do not attack. They wait to be seen. The fear comes not from what is in the room, but from the years spent pretending it was empty. As the candlelight reaches the corners, the air shifts. The room doesn't shrink. It breathes. You realize it was never darkness that frightened you. It was your absence within it. The shadow is a teacher disguised as dust. It contains the emotions that once protected you, the anger that defended your boundaries, the envy that revealed your forgotten desires, the grief that proved your capacity to love. To reject them is to reject the wisdom they carry. To meet them is to reclaim your own gold. Jung understood that integration, not denial, leads to wholeness. The attic is not a punishment. It is a library of truths written in invisible ink. A small practice can open this door. Sit quietly and write about a feeling you often avoid, not by name, but by your image. If the feeling were weather, what would it be? If it were a sound, how would it echo? Do not analyze, describe. In giving shape to what hides, you begin to translate shadow into light. When you finish, read the words aloud. Notice how the air changes. The attic does not feel haunted anymore. It feels inhabited. Dust settles gently. The candle burns steady. What once frightened you has simply become familiar. The shadow is not the enemy. It is the room you have never entered. There are moments when the reflection in the mirror feels slightly off, as if someone else is standing behind the glass. The outline is familiar, yet the gaze carries a question you do not want to answer. It happens quietly, in the middle of a conversation that stirs irritation, in the glance that wakes jealousy, in the pause between fear and denial. That faint unease is the mind whispering that the stranger you fear is not outside you, but within. The emotions that disturb us most often belong to this hidden guest. Anger that flares without clear reason, envy that unsettles, weakness that feels humiliating. Each is a voice from the deeper layers of the psyche. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." What he meant was that what we refuse to see in ourselves eventually writes our story for us. The shadow speaks in the tone of our judgments, the shape of our reactions, the people we choose to blame. Every time we call someone difficult, selfish, or cold, a reflection flickers behind the words, and if we look closely, it is our own outline staring back. Picture a cracked mirror. Every fragment reflects a different version of the same face. One piece holds calm, another hides resentment, another shimmers with fear. We tend to polish the fragments we like and turn away from the ones that distort us, not realizing that the distortion comes from avoidance, not from truth. The stranger in the glass is not a threat. It is the part of you that has waited to be acknowledged. Each emotion you reject sharpens its reflection, waiting for the day you are still enough to see it clearly. Meeting this stranger requires tenderness, not confrontation. It begins with noticing how easily irritation arises, how quickly the heart tightens when someone mirrors your own buried traits. The person who angers you may not be your enemy. They may simply carry a trait you haven't learned to accept in yourself. The resentment you feel toward another's confidence might conceal your own abandoned power. The fear of someone's indifference might echo the distance you keep from your own vulnerability. The mirror cracks not to break you, but to multiply the angles from which truth can enter. The practice is simple but disarming. The next time anger or discomfort surfaces, pause before it takes shape in words. Ask softly, which part of me is reacting right now? The answer might not come in language. It may come as an image, a sensation, a memory rising like dust. Do not rush to fix it. Sit with it as you would with a guest you have not seen in years. Listen. In that listening, the stranger becomes less strange. The reflection aligns slowly until the fractured image begins to resemble a single whole. Nothing has been conquered, only understood. The mind feels quieter, not because the emotions are gone, but because they have been given a place to rest. The mirror remains cracked, but light travels through the seams now, turning sharp edges into paths of illumination. The stranger was never here to harm you. It came to remind you of your forgotten rooms, of the feelings that once had no name. Fear is a mirror turned toward home. Dawn arrives gently, its first light dissolving what remains of the night. The contrast is not violent. Darkness does not flee. It folds itself into the brightness, and together they create the quiet gradient we call morning. This is how healing happens, not by banishing what hurts, but by learning how to let it stand beside the rest of you. The soul grows not through exorcism, but through integration. For much of life, we are taught that peace means purity, that wholeness is the absence of conflict. We spend years trying to silence what feels ugly or broken, pushing anger into corners, disguising sadness as productivity, painting fear with a smile. Yet the more we exile these pieces, the louder they return. What we try to kill in ourselves becomes what controls us. The shadow does not need punishment, it needs inclusion. It longs to be seen the way the dawn sees the night, as something necessary to the shape of light. Jung understood this balance deeply. To become whole, he said, is not to become good, but real. Healing is not the cleansing of darkness, but its translation into meaning. The parts you once called weak or shameful are not stains. They are languages you have not yet learned to read. Anger might be the dialect of boundaries. Sadness might be the echo of something sacred you lost. Fear might simply be the body's way of saying, "Be gentle here." When you begin to listen, the chaos organizes itself into coherence. The noise becomes rhythm. This is the work of integration, not to argue with emotion, not to erase it, but to sit with it long enough for understanding to arrive. When a heavy feeling rises from within, do not rush to drown it in reason. Let it surface. Let it breathe. The next time the chest tightens or the throat burns with words unsaid, pause for a moment and whisper, "I see you." Such a small gesture, yet it changes everything. In being seen, the emotion loosens. It no longer needs to scream for attention. Imagine standing at the edge of the morning where darkness and light overlap. The two are not enemies. They are halves of the same sky, completing one another through difference. To deny one is to flatten the horizon. The self, too, depends on this union, the bright and the shadowed, the calm and the trembling, the love and the doubt. When you accept both, the boundaries between them blur, and what remains is quiet understanding. No storm follows, only balance. The mind does not need to win, it needs to hold. The heart does not need to shine, it needs to stay open. The dawn has never conquered the night, it has only learned to include it. Healing, then, is not a triumph, but a truce. Acceptance is the first light. There comes a quiet morning when the room you have lived in for years feels slightly unfamiliar. The walls still stand. The window still lets in the same light. The objects rest where they always have. Yet something in the air has changed. The colors look muted, the sounds duller, the warmth thinner. It is not the world that has faded. It is you who have shifted. The soul has begun to outgrow what once held it. This moment can feel like loss, but it is not decay. It is the quiet movement of growth beneath the surface. What once gave comfort now feels heavy because you are no longer the person who needed it. A friend's familiar advice sounds distant. The old routines that once kept you safe now press against your ribs. Even joy begins to take a different shape. It is tempting to blame boredom or restlessness. Yet what you are experiencing is not emptiness. It is transition. The self is molting. In the language of nature, this is autumn within the soul. The trees do not mourn when their leaves fall. They surrender with grace. The fading is not failure. It is the way the earth prepares for rest, for renewal. What once shimmered with importance may now fall quietly away, and that falling is necessary. Growth is not about adding more light, but learning when to let darkness do its work. The ground must rest before it can bloom again. You may try to hold on to what once sustained you, the same songs, the same habits, the same people. But the melody no longer fits your rhythm. This dissonance is not betrayal. It is the body's way of saying it is time to move. The past is not a prison, but it becomes one if you refuse to leave. The nostalgia that lingers in your mind is only memory asking for permission to sleep. There's a strange tenderness in realizing that what once healed you now exhausts you. It means the wound has closed. You no longer need the same medicine. You are not cold for changing. You are simply becoming. Growth often looks like detachment because the heart needs space to make room for what is next. A gentle practice can help you see this truth. Write down 3 things that once brought you comfort but now feel heavy. Do not judge them. Simply acknowledge their presence. Maybe it is a song you played too many times, a place that no longer welcomes you, a routine that feels hollow. As you name them, imagine them as leaves in your hand. Once vibrant, now ready to return to the soil. You do not need to throw them away. You only need to release your grip. The world will regain its color, but not the same shades as before. What fades is not lost. It simply changes form, making space for the new palette of your becoming. In this quiet season of the soul, remember, what fades, frees. The afternoon light falls softly across the desk where an old photograph lies. The edges have yellowed, the face is caught in a joy that feels both close and unreachable. You recognize yourself there, same smile, same eyes, yet something inside you knows that person is gone, not in body, but in essence. The image no longer mirrors who you are. It belongs to a chapter that has closed quietly behind you. This realization carries a peculiar ache. Growth is often mistaken for victory, yet in truth, every step forward is also a small farewell. We outgrow not only places and people, but entire versions of ourselves. The one who once sought approval, who feared solitude, who believed love must be earned. That self fades, leaving traces like fingerprints on glass. You are still made of them, but you no longer live where they once stood. Every shedding is a silent funeral. It is natural to mourn what you have outgrown. The world rarely speaks of this grief because it is not loud or visible. It is the ache that arrives in quiet moments, when a memory stirs tenderness instead of longing, when an old dream no longer excites you, when laughter from the past feels like a foreign language. You might call it nostalgia, but it is closer to reverence. A small ceremony of the soul, honoring what once mattered enough to shape you. Jung described growth as a kind of psychic death, the ego losing its throne so that the self may breathe. This is not tragedy, but renewal. Just as trees shed their leaves, so new ones can grow. The psyche must let its old patterns decay to nourish the roots below. The fallen leaves do not curse the wind that took them. They return quietly to the soil, feeding what will one day rise again. Resisting this change only deepens the ache. Holding on to who you were keeps you standing in a doorway meant to be crossed. The heart knows this instinctively. It whispers that endings are not failures. They are transitions dressed in silence. When you let the old self rest, you make room for the next form of being, gentler, wiser, more porous to light. A simple act of gratitude can soften this passage. Write a small letter of thanks to something you have released, a habit, a belief, a love that no longer fits. Do not analyze. Just thank it for what it gave, for the comfort it once offered, for the version of you it helped survive. In that acknowledgement, the grief turns to grace. The photograph remains, but its meaning transforms. You no longer see loss, you see continuity. Every version of you has carried the next one in its arms, like time passing the torch to time. Letting go is not forgetting. It is remembering differently. And in that tender remembering, the heart learns how to keep walking forward, lightened yet never empty. There is a moment in every transformation when you find yourself standing between two shores. Behind you lies the familiar land, the patterns, identities, and comforts that once defined your world. Ahead, a fog-covered distance waits, whispering of something not yet formed. Between them stretches a bridge of quiet uncertainty. This is the liminal space, the tender, trembling ground between who you were and who you are becoming. At first, it feels like suspension, as though life has pressed pause. You are no longer anchored in the old, yet not quite ready to inhabit the new. Days blur into a strange rhythm where time feels soft and porous. You might sense the urge to rush across the bridge to reach the safety of solid ground, but the soul moves differently. Transformation is not a sprint, it is a slow crossing. The bridge is not punishment, it is preparation. Jung called this in-between place a psychic threshold, a zone where the ego loosens and the deeper self begins to emerge. It is both uncomfortable and sacred. The mind tries to fill the silence with plans and explanations, but the soul prefers stillness. This pause, this empty space, is where integration ripens. It is where all the fragments of what you've shed and what you're becoming begin to weave quietly together. Imagine standing on that bridge. Beneath you, the river moves with patient strength, carrying away what no longer needs to return. The air is calm, but charged with the quiet electricity of change. You look ahead and see nothing clearly, yet you sense movement, subtle, inevitable. The bridge sways slightly, reminding you that balance is not stillness, but surrender. You breathe, and the river breathes back. The modern world teaches us to fear pause, to feel every moment with motion, noise, or progress. Yet this empty space between selves is where clarity is born. To hurry through it is to miss the lesson it offers. That patience is not waiting for something to happen, but allowing what is happening to shape you. Every breath taken here is a conversation with becoming. If you find yourself in this place now, uncertain, suspended, unfinished, take a slow breath. Feel your feet on the bridge. You do not need to cross tonight. You do not need to name the new version of yourself. Just stand where you are and let the wind pass through you. Growth does not announce itself. It gathers quietly, one breath at a time. There is grace in remaining. The bridge exists not to rush you, but to hold you long enough for the old skin to fall away gently. On the other side waits a version of you that already knows how to walk forward. Until then, stay where the river hums beneath your feet, and the horizon waits without pressure. Patience is the bridge between who you were and who you will be. The room is still, even the clock has stopped, as if time itself has paused to listen. In the quiet, the usual noise of the mind begins to soften. All the plans, doubts, and rehearsed conversations slowly dissolving like mist. Beneath the surface of thought, something else begins to stir. Subtle, wordless, but sure. This is intuition, the quiet compass of the soul, the intelligence that only awakens when everything else falls silent. We often mistake clarity for thinking harder, pushing the mind to solve, analyze, and control. Yet the mind, restless and loud, cannot see the whole picture. It is like a hand trying to smooth the surface of water, only to create more ripples. Intuition waits below that surface, patient and unmoving, waiting for the moment when the hand stops shaking. Only then does the reflection appear clear. Jung once observed that the soul speaks not in words, but in symbols and sensations. The faint pull toward a choice, the quiet discomfort that warns you to step back, the sudden calm that settles when something is right. These are not coincidences. They are communications from the deeper self, which does not argue or insist, only whispers. The challenge is not to make it louder, but to make ourselves quiet enough to hear. In a world addicted to speed and proof, trusting intuition feels almost rebellious. We are taught to seek answers externally, to measure every move against logic and data. But there are moments, the most important ones, when logic hesitates and intuition steps forward. The call is rarely dramatic. It feels like gravity, soft but undeniable. You may not be able to explain it, but some part of you already knows. To find this compass, you must create stillness deliberately. Before every important decision, give yourself 30 seconds of silence. Let the noise settle. Do not chase the answer. Let it rise from beneath the surface of thought, like ink spreading through clear water. If you listen long enough, the direction appears, not as command, but as calm. Intuition is not magic. It is memory layered with wisdom, the sum of every experience your conscious mind has forgotten, but your body remembers. It does not rush. It recognizes. It does not shout. It aligns. Like a compass that only works when the hand stops shaking, intuition points true only in stillness. Sit with this awareness now. The quiet you fear is not empty. It is full of direction. The longer you can rest within it, the clearer the path becomes. The room, the breath, the silence, all are instruments tuning to the same frequency. There, beneath thought, beneath noise, you will find what you've been searching for all along. Quiet is the language of clarity. Morning comes softly, wrapped in the hush before the city wakes. A faint chorus of birds gathers outside the window, the sound rising and fading like breath. You take a slow step forward and notice how the floor feels beneath your feet. Cool, steady, real. For a moment, the mind is quiet enough to listen. In that silence, something gentle but precise begins to speak. Not in words, but in sensation. The body knows before the mind decides. Long before logic begins its explanations, the body senses direction. It tightens when a choice is wrong, softens when something aligns. The pulse quickens not just from fear, but from recognition. An ancient intelligence stirring within muscle and nerve. Modern life has trained us to distrust this inner language, to override the instinct that once guided us through both danger and wonder. Yet beneath the noise of reasoning, there is always a hum of knowing. Think of it as a shoreline. Thought is the tide, rushing and retreating, while intuition is the small, consistent rhythm of waves touching sand. Each wave carries a signal, subtle but honest, whispering, "This feels true, this does not." The art of listening is learning to hear that rhythm before the tide becomes too loud. When you pay attention, the signals grow clearer, more trustworthy, more fluent. Jung understood this as the conversation between the conscious and the unconscious, the bridge where intuition crosses into awareness. He believed that wisdom is not discovered through force, but through listening. To listen, one must slow down enough to sense the faint movements beneath the surface. It is not mystical. It is biological, emotional, spiritual, all at once. The heart, the gut, the breath, each holds its own vocabulary of truth. In an age of constant stimulation, this kind of listening feels foreign. We rely on data, opinions, algorithms, anything louder than our own pulse. But intuition rarely competes for attention. It waits. It repeats itself in dreams, in restlessness, in sudden calm. It is the feeling that rises when something unseen aligns with something eternal inside you. You do not analyze it. You recognize it. Begin a simple practice. Each day, choose one small action guided only by feeling. Drink water when your body asks, even if the clock says it is not time. Walk in the opposite direction of routine just because it feels lighter. Pause in conversation when your chest tightens. Let yourself respond, not from habit, but from the whisper beneath it. Over time, you will find that your inner compass sharpens, not through effort, but through trust. Listening is not surrendering reason, it is expanding it. The mind translates, but the body receives. Together, they form a wiser intelligence, one that moves slower but truer. The quiet you create becomes a language, and your life begins to speak back to you through sensation, timing, and ease. Every great truth begins as a whisper. To hear it, you must stop demanding answers and start feeling for direction. Let the mind test what the heart suggests. Trust the whisper. Test the truth. There are nights when the mind and the heart seem to speak in different languages. One calculates, the other aches. One draws lines, the other follows tides. You sit between them, translating endlessly, hoping one will surrender. But true peace does not come when one wins. It arrives when both are allowed to speak and be heard. Jung believed that wholeness emerges when reason and emotion finally learn to hold hands. The human mind is a brilliant architect. It builds systems, arguments, and stories that make the world appear solid. Yet logic by itself is sterile, a lamp that illuminates without warmth. Emotion, in contrast, is the pulse that brings light to life. It floods meaning into every choice, but can drown reason if left untamed. Together, they complete one another. One sees the path, the other knows why it matters. Imagine placing one hand on your chest and one on your forehead. Between them lies the space where wisdom lives, not in opposition, but in conversation. The heart beats its steady truth, while the mind measures and refines it. In that stillness, you can feel the current connecting both, a flow neither purely rational nor purely instinctive. It is the middle ground where knowing becomes understanding. Jung saw this integration as the moment the self awakens. It is when thought no longer suppresses feeling and feeling no longer sabotages thought. The two become partners in perception, each expanding the other. Logic brings clarity, instinct brings depth. Together, they reveal meaning. When they are divided, the self fractures, one side frozen in analysis, the other lost in emotion. The task of individuation is not to choose, but to unite. We have been taught to mistrust this union. The world praises intellect and distrusts emotion, as though the heart were an unreliable witness, yet the mind, left untempered by feeling, can justify cruelty in the name of order, and the heart, without reason's guidance, can mistake longing for love. Harmony does not silence either voice. It teaches them rhythm, when to lead, when to listen, when to rest. A gentle practice can help you find this balance. Draw 2 columns on paper. At the top of one, write, I think. On the other, I feel. Then let both sides speak. Do not censor or compare. When finished, read through the 2 lists slowly. Somewhere between a sentence from one side and a whisper from the other, you will find a quiet overlap. A phrase that feels both true and calm. That is your inner alignment speaking. Reason and emotion are not rivals. They are the twin wings that allow consciousness to lift above confusion. To favor one over the other is to fly in circles. When they move together, every decision becomes an act of harmony, clear, kind, and steady. In the end, wisdom is not born from brilliance or passion alone, but from their gentle union. The head provides the map, the heart chooses the direction. Between pulse and thought, light finds its form. Wisdom lives where reason and feeling meet. The room is dim, lit only by the soft glow of a single lamp. On the shelf, a golden trophy stands where it has always been. Once a symbol of pride, now gathering a thin layer of dust. The metal still gleams faintly under the light, but its glow feels tired, almost indifferent. You look at it and realize that what once made your heart race now barely stirs a pulse. The prize has not changed, but you have. The gold no longer shines in the dark. There is a quiet moment in every life when achievement begins to lose its gravity. What once felt like proof of worth starts to feel like a story from another lifetime. The applause fades, the titles blur, and the weight of recognition no longer anchors you. It is not disappointment, it is awakening. You begin to see that success, though dazzling, cannot feed the hunger of the soul. It can decorate life, but it cannot define it. Jung often spoke of this turning point, the moment when the ego, once obsessed with validation, starts to crumble, making space for the self to breathe. This crumbling is not failure, it is freedom. The mind that once measured meaning by comparison begins to sense a deeper rhythm, one that has nothing to do with rank or reward. As consciousness expands, ambition softens into curiosity. The desire to be seen becomes the desire to be real. The world teaches us to chase brightness, but no one warns us that too much light can blind. We are told to build, to win, to climb, yet no one explains that there is a view only the quiet can reveal. When the noise subsides, what remains is not loss but truth. That the worth of a thing is not in how it glitters, but in what it gives. Gold turns to dust because it was never meant to last forever. Its real purpose is to remind us that even the most prized illusions fade. As you stand in that still room, ask yourself a simple question. If no one were watching, what would still feel worth doing? Sit with the first honest answer that rises. It may be quiet, tending a garden, writing something no one will read, helping without being thanked. These are the acts that remain luminous when all spotlights dim. The soul recognizes meaning by its weightlessness, not its shine. We live in a culture that confuses attention with value. But meaning, like wealth of the spirit, grows in silence. In the moments when no audience is present, when the heart acts simply because it must, you begin to realize that the most valuable things are invisible. Peace, integrity, tenderness, truth. They do not shimmer, but they endure. One day, the dust will settle over every golden prize. The trophies will fade, the titles will be forgotten, but the quiet good you have done will keep echoing, like light moving long after its source has gone dark. In that realization, ambition becomes grace. You no longer chase radiance, you become it. Meaning is a wealth. Morning unfolds gently. Light filters through the curtains, landing softly on a wooden table where steam rises from a cup of tea. The air is still, the world undecided between silence and motion. You lift the cup and notice how the warmth meets your hands, how the scent curls upward, how time seems to stretch inside that single moment. Nothing extraordinary happens, yet for the first time in a long while, it feels enough. Camus once wrote, "The simple joy of breathing can defeat the absurd." He understood that even in a world that often makes no sense, small joys can ground us, not because they fix life's chaos, but because they remind us that existence itself is still miraculous. When the mind stops demanding meaning from everything, meaning returns on its own, carried in small gestures. The way light moves across a wall, the rhythm of footsteps on quiet streets, the echo of laughter that fades but doesn't disappear. There is a point in every awakening where you begin to notice what you once overlooked. After chasing grand purposes, the soul grows tired and turns back to simplicity, like a traveler realizing that home was never a destination, but a way of seeing. The ordinary becomes sacred again. A sip of tea, a window opened, a breath drawn without rush. When the mind stops reaching, the present moment expands, revealing its quiet generosity. Jung might say, this is the return of balance. When the ego loosens its grip, the senses come alive. You begin to feel life not as a problem to solve, but as something to be tasted, inhaled, witnessed. Even the smallest act becomes a conversation with being. The world, once dimmed by striving, glows again. Not because it has changed, but because you have. The tea cools as you sit in stillness. Each sip dissolves a little more of the distance between thought and experience. The liquid touches the tongue, spreads warmth through the chest, anchors you to the simplicity of now. There is no story here, no achievement, only presence. In this simplicity lies an abundance that success could never offer. Try a small practice. Once a day, choose to do something ordinary with full attention. Drink water slowly. Feel the pulse in your wrist. Watch light shift across the floor. Do it not to be mindful, but to remember what it feels like to exist without rushing. Life does not reward speed. It rewards awareness. The return of small joys marks a deeper transformation, the kind that doesn't shout, but hums softly beneath the surface. It is the moment you realize that contentment was never hidden in the extraordinary, but scattered throughout the everyday. You do not have to reach for happiness anymore. It has been waiting for you in every quiet corner. The warmth of tea, the whisper of air, the steady rhythm of breath. Presence is abundance. In a dark room, a small flame flickers. It burns without urgency, steady but alive, its light reaching just far enough to keep the shadows honest. There is no roar, no spectacle, no hunger to consume the air around it. And yet, this quiet flame endures longer than any wildfire. This is what true ambition feels like once the noise fades. Not the rush to conquer, but the calm certainty of direction. The world often confuses ambition with volume. We are told to chase, to prove, to outshine. We are measured by acceleration, not by depth. But there comes a time when the soul begins to resist the pressure to perform. It no longer seeks validation in applause or recognition in struggle. The hunger remains, but it becomes refined. No longer about being seen, but about being true. Ambition in its higher form becomes devotion. It moves inward, not outward. Jung believed that when energy turns toward the inner world, it transforms from drive to purpose. Outward ambition builds structures. Inward ambition builds character. The first seeks a stage. The second seeks stillness. The flame within does not compete with the dark. It coexists with it, illuminating enough space for one honest step at a time. You begin to realize that you do not need to shout to move mountains. You only need to stay steady, to trust that momentum born of peace will always outlast that born of fear. This quiet ambition does not reject goals. It simply roots them in awareness. It asks, what kind of person must I become to reach this dream without losing my soul? It shifts focus from outcome to essence, from speed to alignment. Every goal becomes a mirror, not just of what you want, but of what you are ready to embody. A simple practice can help you find this balance. Write down one goal that truly matters to you. Beneath it, write one feeling you wish to keep when you achieve it. Peace, clarity, gratitude, love. Then look at both words until they align. If the path toward the goal begins to cost the feeling you want to preserve, pause. The destination is not worth it if it requires you to betray your own rhythm. There is immense strength in those who move quietly. They are not driven by applause, but by alignment. Their power is felt, not broadcast. They walk slowly, but they arrive whole. True ambition, like the flame in the dark, is sustained not by noise, but by oxygen, by space, by patience, by care. You do not have to run to prove you are moving. The calmest waters hold the deepest currents. When your striving grows silent, your steps become deliberate. Your will becomes art. Let the world rush ahead. You will get there, unhurried, unbroken, and entirely yourself. Move, but without noise. In the quiet of evening, a pair of hands hold a small stone. It is smooth, cold, perfectly ordinary. Yet it grows heavier with time. The longer it is held, the more it demands. The fingers stiffen, the arm aches, the shoulders tense. The weight itself is not the problem. It is the refusal to let it go. This is how most burdens live within us, not as punishments, but as choices we've forgotten we are still making. People often believe that strength means endurance, that holding on is proof of love, loyalty, or resilience. We grip the stones of our past, regrets, expectations, unsolved fears, believing that to release them is to lose part of ourselves. Yet the truth is quieter, simpler, and infinitely kinder. We do not suffer because of what we carry, but because we do not set it down. The mind clings to pain as if it were identity. The heart resists surrender, mistaking release for defeat. But letting go is not giving up. It is remembering that peace weighs nothing. Jung wrote that what we resist persists. The energies we suppress do not disappear. They turn inward, pressing against the soul until we can no longer ignore them. To release is to stop resisting, to stop tightening around what already wants to pass. Like water trying to hold its shape, our grief and fears only stagnate when we force them to stay. When allowed to flow, they cleanse instead of corrode. Picture again those hands, trembling slightly, still holding the stone. Imagine placing it gently on the ground. The air feels lighter, the muscles unwind. Nothing dramatic happens. The world does not change, but your relationship to it does. This is what inner freedom feels like. The problem was never the stone. It was the grip. In practice, this letting go can begin with something simple. Take a blank sheet of paper and write down one worry that visits you too often, a thought that loops, a memory that still stings. When you finish, read it once, breathe deeply, and then burn or tear the paper. Watch the ashes rise or the fragments scatter. As they do, imagine that weight leaving your body. You are not erasing the past. You are choosing not to keep carrying it. The act may seem small, but it opens space. The kind of space where clarity returns, where compassion has room to stand. Release is not a single event, but a rhythm. A muscle the soul must remember how to use. Some stones you'll set down easily. Others you'll carry a little longer until one day you wake and realize your hands have opened on their own. Freedom is rarely loud. It begins with something as quiet as an exhale. The lightness that follows is not emptiness, but renewal. You will still have burdens, but now they will move with you, not through you. To let go is not to stop loving. It is to love wisely. Release is also an act of love. In the hush of morning, a small garden breathes behind a wooden fence. Dew clings to the leaves. The earth smells of quiet life. The fence is not tall, not meant to keep the world away, only to protect what grows within. It does not divide, it defines. Without it, the soil would be trampled, the roots exposed. With it, the flowers can rest, gather light, and bloom. Boundaries, too, are like this fence, not walls of rejection, but structures of care. Many believe that kindness means saying yes. The compassion is the endless giving of oneself until nothing remains. We are taught to stretch, to absorb, to accommodate. But love without limits turns to exhaustion, and generosity without ground becomes guilt. The soul, like a garden, needs form to thrive. A fence is not cruelty. It is wisdom shaped into presence. It says, I wish to stay open, but not unguarded. I wish to love, but not at the cost of myself. Jung understood that integration requires both openness and structure, that the psyche must define its edges before it can feel whole. When you set a boundary, you do not push the world away. You invite it to meet you at the right distance. You teach others how to honor your space, and in doing so, you teach yourself to honor your worth. The fence is not a prison. It is a promise to tend to what is growing inside. There will always be guilt in the beginning. Saying no feels like betrayal, especially when your heart is gentle. But true compassion is not the absence of no. It is the courage to choose where your yes belongs. Boundaries protect your energy so it can be offered with sincerity, not obligation. They ensure that love remains a gift, not a transaction. Think of your life as that small garden. Each relationship, each responsibility is a plant with its own rhythm of care. Some need more sunlight, some need pruning, some must be left to rest. Without a fence, everything begins to compete for space. The roots tangle, the blossoms wither. But once the garden is enclosed, defined by quiet clarity, balance returns, growth resumes, peace settles. Try this practice in the coming days. Choose one situation where you usually say yes, even when your body whispers no. This time, pause, breathe, respond with honesty and gentleness. Not today, or I would love to, but I need rest. Watch what happens not in the other person, but within you. That moment of alignment is self-respect awakening. Boundaries are not the end of connection. They are the foundation of real intimacy. When you respect your edges, others learn how to meet you there, not consume you. The garden remains open to sunlight, to rain, to life. Only now it grows stronger, wilder, more beautiful. The fence stands quietly in the background, its purpose fulfilled in silence. Kindness includes yourself. The window is open. A soft breeze drifts through, stirring the curtains, carrying with it the faint scent of rain and earth. The air feels lighter than usual, as if the world itself is reminding you that release can be gentle. You sit there, letting the wind touch your skin, and realize that forgiveness feels a lot like this. Unseen, quiet, yet cleansing. It is not an erasure of what happened, but a shift in how it lives within you. Forgiveness has long been misunderstood as forgetting, as if healing requires pretending that the wound never existed. But true forgiveness is not about memory. It is about movement. It does not rewrite the story. It reclaims the energy trapped inside it. The past remains, but its power over you dissolves. Jung once noted that what we hold in resentment eventually becomes part of us. A ghost that drinks from our strength. To forgive, then, is not to absolve another. It is to unchain yourself. There is a deep, invisible cost to anger. It hardens the muscles, thickens the breath, poisons the quiet moments when peace tries to visit. Resentment convinces you that you are protecting your pain, but what you are really doing is preserving it. The longer you grip the rope of bitterness, the more it burns. The hand bleeds, yet you call it safety. But when you finally unclench, even slightly, you discover the wound begins to close on its own. Imagine that rope now, stretched between you and a memory that still stings. You have carried it for so long that you've forgotten what your arms feel like without it. Take a deep breath. See yourself loosening the grip, not cutting, not denying, simply allowing gravity to take its course. The rope falls away. The space between you and the memory widens, filled with air, with light, with possibility. You have not forgotten what was done, but you no longer live inside it. That is forgiveness. This act does not need to be dramatic. It can begin in the smallest ways. Whisper to yourself, I release the need to keep this pain alive. Repeat it not as a command, but as a slow invitation. Forgiveness is a practice, not a performance. Some days you will feel free, others the rope will tighten again. But each breath of letting go weakens its pull. Slowly, the memory remains, but the emotion changes shape. It becomes wisdom instead of weight. To forgive without forgetting is to choose awareness over denial, compassion over defense. It is understanding that you can remember clearly without reliving painfully. The window remains open, the wind continues to pass through, and the air inside stays soft. You cannot control the storms that once entered your life, but you can choose to keep the window open to calm. Forgiveness is not a gift to those who hurt you. It is the return of your own freedom. When resentment ends, energy returns, and the heart begins to breathe again. Freedom begins where resentment ends. Night has settled completely. The hum of the world has faded, and only the soft rhythm of breath remains. The room feels vast in its stillness, as though sound itself has stepped outside to rest. At first, the quiet feels heavy, almost intimidating, the kind that makes the mind reach for distraction. But if you stay long enough, if you resist the urge to fill the space, something unexpected happens. The silence begins to change shape. It stops feeling empty. It starts to feel alive. Silence, for most of us, begins as absence, the missing of noise, of words, of reassurance. Yet silence is not the absence of life. It is the echo of understanding. Within it, you can hear what the world constantly drowns out. The pulse of your body, the murmur of thought, the quiet intelligence beneath fear. Jung believed that when we turn inward and listen without judgment, we meet the soul, not as an idea, but as presence. Silence is the language it speaks. We spend so much of our lives trying to escape it. We surround ourselves with music, with conversation, with movement, anything to avoid the weight of our own company. The irony is that silence was never the enemy. It was the mirror we were afraid to look into. The noise we chase often disguises discomfort, not with the world, but with ourselves. When we stop running, when we finally sit still, silence reveals that it was never empty. It was waiting. Think of it like walking into a dark forest. At first, you hear nothing but your own footsteps. Then slowly, the sounds emerge. The rustle of leaves, the hum of insects, the wind threading through branches. The forest was never quiet. It simply required you to listen differently. The same is true for the inner world. Beneath the surface of silence, life hums in quiet coordination. The heartbeat, the breath, the subtle rhythm of thought aligning itself with peace. Camus once wrote that in the depths of winter, he discovered within himself an invincible summer. Silence is that winter, still, cold, stripped of noise. Yet beneath it lies warmth, the steady pulse of something unbreakable. When you learn to befriend silence, it no longer feels like exile. It becomes refuge. You begin to trust it, to return to it, to understand that peace is not found in escaping noise, but in not needing it. Try this simple ritual. For 5 minutes each day, live without artificial sound. No music, no screens, no voices. Just breathe and notice the small sounds that remain. The ticking of the clock, the breath moving through your chest, the faint stir of air. At first, it may feel uncomfortable. Then it becomes grounding. You start to hear the quiet patterns of existence, not dramatic, but deeply real. Silence, when entered with openness, does not erase the self. It deepens it. It teaches that clarity does not shout. The truth rarely announces itself. What feels like nothingness becomes the canvas where awareness paints itself back into being. The longer you stay, the more you realize that stillness has a voice, and it has always been calling you home. In stillness, life whispers. A river moves quietly beneath the late afternoon light. Its surface glimmers where the sun touches it, yet beneath, the current carries both clear and murky waters together without resistance. It does not separate the pure from the impure. It flows as one body, whole and unashamed of its complexity. Jung once said, "I would rather be whole than good." He understood what the river has always known, that harmony is not achieved by dividing the clean from the unclean, but by allowing all of it to belong. Perfection is a beautiful illusion. Polished, symmetrical, distant. It promises safety through control, but in truth, it erases the very things that make us human. The pursuit of perfection is a chase toward an ever-receding horizon, a quiet violence against our own contradictions. To be whole, on the other hand, is to invite every part of the self, the proud and the fearful, the tender and the flawed, to sit at the same table. It is to accept that our light shines because of our shadows, not in spite of them. Wholeness does not ask us to be consistent. It asks us to be honest. It means admitting that some days the river runs clear and others it carries mud, yet both are part of the same flow. The soul grows not through purity, but through inclusion, through the courage to hold paradox without judgment. Jung believed that the human spirit matures when it stops rejecting what it cannot control. The task is not to conquer our contradictions, but to integrate them until peace emerges from their tension. Imagine holding a mirror that reflects every side of you, the ambition and the fatigue, the joy and the guilt, the parts that crave connection and the ones that fear it. You may not like every reflection, but each one is necessary. Together, they form the truth of your being. When you stop polishing the mirror, you begin to see clearly. The scratches and cracks do not distort you. They prove you are real. In practice, you can begin this shift by writing down 3 things about yourself that are imperfect but cherished: your impatience that hides deep care, your tendency to overthink that springs from curiosity, your scars that remind you of survival. Notice how these so-called flaws are not obstacles, but evidence of depth. Wholeness is not about improvement. It is about relationship. How gently you can hold your contradictions without trying to fix them. The river does not filter itself to be worthy of the sea. It trusts that every drop, clear or clouded, has a place in the journey. Likewise, the self becomes free when it stops striving to be spotless and learns to flow as it is. To be whole is to be kind to every version of yourself, past and present, pure and imperfect. In that kindness, you discover that peace was never in flawlessness. It was in allowing yourself to be entirely human. Wholeness is kinder than perfection. After the storm, the world holds its breath. The ground, still wet from rain, glistens under the first light of dawn. The air feels new, washed, emptied, yet full of quiet promise. There are no trumpets to announce the change, no great noise to mark the moment. Only the sound of droplets falling from leaves, only the slow return of color to the sky. This is how most rebirths happen, not as explosions, but as soft unveilings. The human spirit renews itself in the same way. After long nights of confusion or loss, after the breaking and unmaking that life demands, the first sign of healing rarely comes as joy. It arrives as stillness. Something subtle shifts, like the earth exhaling after rain. You do not wake transformed. You simply notice that the ache has quieted, that your breath feels less heavy, that the world no longer presses quite so hard against your chest. Renewal is not a thunderclap. It is the whisper that says, "You are still here." Jung once described individuation, the process of becoming whole, as the soul's gradual return to its natural rhythm. It does not happen through force, but through surrender. The ego crumbles under its own exhaustion, and what rises from its dust is not a new identity, but a deeper peace with the one that has always been. The self is reborn not by becoming someone else, but by remembering who it was before fear began to speak louder than truth. Imagine standing at your window as the morning unfolds. The world glows in quiet colors, pale gold, soft blue, the gentle gray of clouds learning how to part. You place a hand over your chest and close your eyes. Beneath the skin, you feel the steady rhythm that has carried you through every storm, even the ones you thought would end you. The body knows what the mind forgets, that survival is not a battle, it is a return. Rebirth is not about erasing what was broken. It is about giving the cracks permission to hold light. The pain you endured does not disappear. It becomes transparent, allowing illumination to pass through. Every scar on your heart, every silence you have sat through becomes part of the architecture of your becoming. You are not healed because nothing hurts anymore. You are healed because pain no longer defines your name. Try this quiet practice. When the day feels too loud, rest your hand on your chest and whisper softly, "I am home." Say it not as an affirmation to chase away doubt, but as a truth already waiting inside you. Feel how your breath aligns with the earth's rhythm, how the pulse beneath your palm feels like a small sunrise. You do not need to strive to find peace. You only need to remember that it has been here all along. Outside, the sky brightens slowly and the world begins again, not louder but lighter. So do you. After every night, after every storm, the heart learns once more how to open. Peace is not found, it is remembered. It is almost morning now. The first light touches the wall, pale and kind, softening the edges of the night. Your breath moves slowly, steady, unhurried, a rhythm that belongs entirely to you. You have walked through the masks and the shadows, through silence and release, and somewhere along the way, the noise began to fade. What remains is not emptiness, but clarity. You have met the parts of yourself that were once hidden. And instead of fighting them, you listened. You have learned that peace was never a prize waiting at the end of striving. It was the quiet pulse beneath every storm, waiting to be remembered. You are no longer seeking light because you have realized it was never lost. It only needed space to return. So rest now. Let the air move gently in and out. You have arrived, not at an ending, but at a home that has always been inside you. The journey has not changed who you are. It has revealed what was always true. The silence you feared has become your teacher. Everything you seek outside has always lived within.